Extinction didn't erase their terror. It sealed their legacy. For over 600 million years, Earth was a testing ground for predators, where nature constantly rewrote the rules of survival. It's fascinating to think that some killers struck with surgical precision, while others overwhelmed with sheer power, and a few even turned death into something almost beautiful. I find it particularly interesting that the Smilodon, that saber-toothed cat we all recognize, wasn't always recognized for what it was. The first remains were so perplexing that paleontologists initially mistook them for a type of hyena, all because of some similar cheek teeth. It just goes to show how challenging it can be to piece together the stories of creatures lost to time. Imagine being an apex predator, ruling the wild at the top of the food chain. Life at the top has its perks, but even the most fearsome hunters aren't always the biggest. When it comes to the predator game, size isn't everything. Yet, nature occasionally outdoes itself. It creates a carnivore so specialized, so perfectly adapted to hunting big game, that it seems almost like a creature of myth. These rare beasts develop weapons tailored specifically for tackling the giants of their time. Not too long ago, just a blink of an eye in Earth's timeline, one such feline prowled our planet. This wasn't just any big cat. This was the undisputed monarch of the Ice Age, the Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat extraordinaire. It's iconic, really, with its saber teeth and fierce appearance, a status solidified by its portrayal in films like Ice Age. But rewind the clock about 160 years and picture yourself in Brazil. It's here that our tale begins with a discovery that would perplex the scientific community. When those first Smilodon remains were unearthed, paleontologists didn't immediately recognize them as belonging to a cat. Based on some isolated cheek teeth that bore an uncanny resemblance to those of modern hyenas, they dubbed this new-find hyena Neogaea. However, within a couple of years, the tides of discovery brought forth a tsunami of new fossils. Suddenly, scientists weren't just looking at a few teeth, but a veritable jigsaw puzzle of prehistoric proportions. Foot bones, skull fragments, and those iconic canines, which seemed almost comically oversized for any mouth, painted a very different picture. As the pieces fell into place, it became clear that this was no hyena. Instead, they were dealing with a completely new genus of felid, one that was not only massive in size, but also built like a prehistoric tank. This feline was far more robust than any modern cat, a true heavyweight champion of the Ice Age. In light of this revelation, a new name was in order. Thus, Smilodon populator was born. Smilodon meaning knife tooth and populator, roughly to the destroyer or he who brings devastation. If you're thinking, that sounds like the title of a heavy metal album, you're not wrong. And it's a fitting moniker for a predator that redefined what it meant to be lethal. With its new identity established, the scientific community dove headfirst into unraveling the Smilodon's family tree. This quest for understanding continues to this day, with researchers currently placing our knife-toothed friend in the extinct sub-F family Machairodontinae. This subfamily is home to most of what we colloquially call saber-toothed tigers. Though saber-toothed cats is more accurate since these ancient felines aren't closely related to modern tigers or any living cats for that matter. In fact, their closest living relatives might be members of the feline subfamily, which includes our domestic kitties. Within the Machairodontinae, Smilodon found itself in an even more exclusive club, the Smilodontidae, or as some paleontologists like to call them, the dirk-toothed cats. This group is pretty exclusive, with only 5 known genera calling it home. But what Smilodontidae lacks in diversity, it makes up for in star power, thanks to Smilodon. As research progressed, scientists discovered that Smilodon wasn't a lone standout. It was more like a prehistoric trio with 3 distinct members, each bringing something unique to the table. S. gracilis, S. fatalis, and S. populator. Now, if you found yourself face to face with any of these species, you probably wouldn't be too concerned with which one was about to turn you into lunch. But they did have their differences. First up, we have S. gracilis, the elder statesman of the group. This OG appeared in North America about 2.5 million years ago, descending from an even older genus called Meganterion. Next came S. fatalis, strutting onto the scene roughly 1 million years later. Last, but certainly not least, S. populator made its grand entrance about 600,000 years after fatalis, fashionably late to the Ice Age party. S. gracilis, while no slouch in the size department, was the runt of the litter, tipping the scales at about the same weight as a modern jaguar. S. fatalis, living up to its name, was a step up in the terror department, matching an African lion in size, but packing on extra muscle like a feline bodybuilder. We're talking about 280 kilos or 620 pounds of prehistoric fury. That's on par with the largest tigers roaming the earth today. But S. populator dominated them all. This behemoth pushed the boundaries of felid physiology, with the largest known specimens estimated to have weighed in at a jaw-dropping 470 kilos, or 1,040 pounds. To put that in perspective, that's about the same as a medium-sized polar bear. Interestingly, unlike many modern big cats, Smilodons didn't seem to be too hung up on gender norms. Studies suggest that there wasn't a significant size difference between males and females, a trait scientists call low sexual dimorphism. In practical terms, this means that regardless of whether you were facing a male Smilodon or a female Smilodon, you were in equal danger. I sometimes imagine what it must have been like to face a Smilodon. Being big is impressive, but this wasn't just a large cat. It was built like a prehistoric tank. Its heel bone in particular was a marvel. Some paleontologists even speculate that these Ice Age cats could have outleaped modern lions. Modern lions have been observed clearing heights of 15 feet, or 4.5 meters. Imagine a cat the size of a bear capable of leaping over a 1-story building. But the Smilodon's athletic prowess didn't stop at its fancy footwork. If modern big cats have arms that could crush you, Smilodon's forelimbs took it to the next level. We're talking about limbs that were approximately 20% thicker than what you'd expect for a cat of its size, giving it incredible strength, surpassing even that of the larger American lion. And at the end of those muscular arms, Smilodon was further armed with fully retractable claws, razor-sharp and curved like prehistoric scimitars. They were proportionally enormous, even for a cat of Smilodon's size. We're talking about claws twice the size of a Siberian tiger's and even longer than those of a Kodiak brown bear, an animal that can weigh twice as much as a Smilodon. These weren't just weapons. They were nature's equivalent of grappling hooks, perfect for latching onto large prey. But let's be real. When we think of Smilodon, it's not its impressive vertical leap or powerful forearms that come to mind. It's all about those teeth, those iconic, impossibly long canines that have captured imaginations for generations. Now, saber teeth aren't unique to Smilodon. Nature has played around with this dental design in various mammals and even some non-mammals throughout history. But Smilodon perfected it, taking the concept to an entirely new level. What made Smilodon's fangs special wasn't just their presence, but their sheer audacious length. We're talking about canines so long they protruded well beyond the lower jaw, a feature that was uncommon even among other saber-toothed cats. To put it in perspective, Smilodon's canines could grow up to 8 inches or 20 centimeters long. That's longer than many modern kitchen knives. They were precision instruments of prehistoric destruction. Shaped like deadly daggers with sharp points and smooth, narrow sides, these teeth were designed to pierce deep into flesh with devastating efficiency. Here's where things get really interesting. You'd expect a predator with teeth like that to have a powerful bite to match. But surprisingly, studies have shown that Smilodon's bite was relatively weak, only about 1,000 newtons, which is 4 times weaker than a modern lion's. So, how did it kill? Well, that's been a subject of much debate among paleontologists. One popular theory suggests that Smilodon was the original ambush predator. Picture this: a Smilodon hidden in dense vegetation, waiting for the perfect moment. Then, with a powerful leap, it pounces on its unsuspecting prey. Using those muscular forelimbs and grappling hook claws, it pins down its victim. With precision, it sinks its saber teeth into the prey's soft underbelly, causing massive internal damage and blood loss. But not everyone buys this gut-stabbing hypothesis. Many researchers favor a different but equally grim scenario. They propose that Smilodon used its powerful build to quickly overpower its prey, then delivered a precise, lethal bite to the throat. This would have caused severe blood loss and suffocation, a quick, if not particularly pleasant end for its unfortunate victims. Adding fuel to this theory is the discovery that Smilodon could open its jaw to an incredible 120 degrees. That's almost twice as wide as a human can manage. With a gape like that, pretty much every neck in the Ice Age would have been fair game. But Smilodon wasn't just brawn and teeth. Brain scans of Smilodon skulls suggest that these prehistoric predators had excellent coordination, sharp hearing, and top-notch vision. Their eye socket shape hints at binocular vision, giving them the depth perception needed to judge distances accurately, crucial for a predator that relied on ambush tactics. And if all that wasn't enough, they were fast too. Many Smilodon fossils show trauma to their sternums, the kind of injury you'd expect from high-speed collisions. This suggests that not only were they quick on their feet, but they were also willing to risk life and limb, or at least a bruised chest, in pursuit of their next meal. Smilodon's unique traits, along with its powerful weaponry, made it a versatile hunter capable of taking down a wide variety of megafaunal prey. The specific animals it targeted varied based on the region it called home. In North America, their prey included oversized versions of animals we recognize today: giant bison, camels, and, if the opportunity arose, even mastodons and Columbian mammoths. Yes, these cats were taking down creatures that dwarfed modern elephants. In South America, Smilodon's targets were equally impressive and diverse, including creatures like Toxodon, Litopterna, various species of Glyptodon, along with more familiar animals such as horses and camelids. Some evidence even suggests that Smilodon occasionally went after caimans, cementing its status as a top predator. We know what Smilodon ate thanks to skeletal evidence such as tooth marks on bones or Smilodon remains found alongside those of their prey, providing vital clues about its diet. One big question that's still hotly debated in paleontology circles is whether Smilodon was a lone hunter or a team player. This isn't just academic curiosity. Knowing whether Smilodon hunted in packs could tell us a lot about its social structure and what kind of prey it typically targeted. One of the strongest pieces of evidence supporting the idea that Smilodon lived socially comes from the La Brea tar pits in California. These California tar pits are a gold mine for paleontologists, preserving countless Ice Age animals that got stuck in the sticky asphalt. But most of the bones found in La Brea aren't from herbivores, the La Brea tar pits. I've always found them a bit haunting, really, not just because of the perfectly preserved fossils, but because of the stories they tell of desperation and a brutal struggle for survival. Imagine being a massive herbivore, maybe a bison or a ground sloth, blundering into what looked like solid ground, only to find yourself hopelessly trapped. But it wasn't just herbivores that met their end in those sticky pools. Predators, too, became trapped, often after trying to feast on those already stuck. Smilodon fossils are incredibly common there. Over 196,000 bones have been found. This has led some scientists to believe that Smilodon may have been a social animal. The idea is that, like modern social cat species, they were responsive to distress calls. If one Smilodon got stuck, it might have called for help, inadvertently luring other members of its group to their doom. Grim, I know, but it could explain the sheer number of Smilodon remains. There's another surprisingly touching clue that hints at their possible social behavior. Some Smilodon fossils show evidence of severe injuries or disabilities that would have made hunting nearly impossible. Yet, these individuals lived to adulthood. Some paleontologists have proposed something they call pseudo-healthcare among Smilodons. The idea is that these injured cats were cared for by their fellow Smilodons, much like modern lions or wolves support injured members of their pride or pack. One famous Smilodon fossil shows signs of hip dysplasia from a young age, yet it survived to adulthood. How could such an animal have hunted alone? It paints a heartwarming, if speculative, picture of Smilodon families looking after their own. Of course, not everyone buys the Smilodon social club theory. Some researchers point out that Smilodon remains found outside predator traps like La Brea tend to be more isolated. This, they argue, suggests a more solitary lifestyle, like many modern big cats. Regardless of whether Smilodon was a team player or a loner, it was definitely at the top of the food chain. But that doesn't mean it didn't have competition. The Ice Age was a time of giants, and Smilodon wasn't the only predator with an appetite for mammoth-sized meals. Two of Smilodon's biggest rivals were the American lion and the dire wolf. Now, about those dire wolves. While real dire wolves were impressive, they weren't quite as monstrous as their fictional counterparts. But they were formidable predators, and isotope analysis shows they had a diet very similar to Smilodons. In other words, these predators were often competing for the same prey. So, how did Smilodon stack up against its competitors? Well, against the American lion, it was probably a bit of a standoff. The American lion had size on its side, being one of the largest cats to ever exist. But Smilodon had those impressive canines, which likely served as a pretty effective deterrent. Most likely, these two apex predators tried to avoid each other when possible, but when conflicts did occur, it could have gone either way. The dire wolf, on the other hand, seems to have often come out second best in confrontations with Smilodon. Evidence from La Brea suggests that dire wolves would frequently abandon their kills when a Smilodon showed up. It's not hard to imagine why. With those sabers on full display, most predators would probably decide that discretion was the better part of valor. But lions and wolves weren't the only competition Smilodon had to worry about. The Ice Age was also the time of the short-faced bear, a beast that could make even Smilodon look small by comparison. Some of these bears reached truly dinosaurian proportions, rivaling medium-sized sauropods in weight. However, these ursine giants were more omnivorous than Smilodon, which likely reduced direct competition. Plus, bears tend to be solitary creatures. So, if a group of Smilodons encountered one, the bear would likely have decided that this particular picnic basket wasn't worth the trouble. We've talked a lot about Smilodon's impressive hunting adaptations, but how did it eat with those ridiculous teeth? Those saber-like fangs seemed like they would have been quite the obstacle during feeding. Well, Smilodon had a solution for that, too. Unlike most predators that can chomp down from the front, Smilodon was equipped with specialized slicing teeth called carnassials. These teeth, situated on the sides of the mouth, worked like biological scissors, shearing through meat with ease. To eat, Smilodon would have turned its head to the side, using these carnassials to slice off manageable chunks of meat while its saber teeth stayed out of the way. If this eating style sounds familiar, that's because you might have seen it in action. Many modern cats, and even other predators, use a similar technique when tackling tough pieces of meat. It's a prime example of nature's problem-solving. When life gives you saber teeth, you adapt your eating style accordingly. With its unique adaptations and hunting prowess, Smilodon carved out a vast empire for itself. Between its three species, it achieved a distribution across the Western Hemisphere that would make any modern predator green with envy. In North America, S. gracilis and S. fatalis roamed from coast to coast, reaching as far north as Alberta, Canada. Meanwhile, in South America, S. fatalis and S. populator established a domain stretching all the way down to Patagonia. But Smilodon wasn't just geographically widespread, it was also adaptable. Fossils have been found in a diverse array of environments, from grasslands and plains to woodlands and closed forests, from savannas to subtropical forests, and even mammoth steppes. This adaptability allowed Smilodon to live alongside a veritable who's who of Pleistocene megafauna. We're talking about a world where you might encounter short-faced bears, proboscideans, ground sloths the size of cars, armored glyptodonts, the rhino-like toxodon, camels, deer, horses, bison, and even terror birds. It's easy to picture the Ice Age as a real-life video game level, but with one terrifying upgrade: prehistoric cats. And there was one more species that Smilodon encountered near its end, one that would forever alter the planet: humans. It's thought that our ancestors first crossed paths with Smilodon around 25,000 years ago. Imagine being an early human, armed with only primitive tools, suddenly face to face with a saber-toothed cat. It must have been a tense relationship. We were, after all, competing for the same food. And, unfortunately for our ancestors, only the larger populator and fatalis species remained by the time humans arrived. Bad timing indeed. Given that Meganterion, a possible predecessor to Smilodon, was known to sometimes prey on Homo erectus, it's easy to imagine that Smilodon might have considered early humans potential prey too. But humans are nothing if not resourceful. While we don't have direct evidence of human Smilodon confrontations, our superior technology and group tactics likely allowed us to turn the tables on these predators from time to time. In fact, in 2021, researchers discovered something extraordinary: a petroglyph that seems to depict a group of humans observing a Smilodon from a distance. It's a tantalizing glimpse into a world where our ancestors shared the landscape with these magnificent and terrifying creatures. But, as we know, this coexistence didn't last. Sometime between then and now, Smilodon disappeared from the face of the earth. The youngest remains of both fatalis and populator date back roughly 10,000 years, around the same time that humans in some parts of the world were discovering agriculture. The extinction of Smilodon is a topic that still fuels debate among paleontologists. Some argue that humans played a significant role in their demise, either through direct competition or by altering habitats through practices like controlled burns. Others are less convinced of humanity's impact. The more widely accepted theory points to the broader quaternary extinction event as the primary culprit. This was a period of significant climate change that saw the disappearance of many large animal species in North and South America. As the megafauna that Smilodon relied on for food began to die out, the saber-toothed predator found itself in an increasingly precarious position. In a cruel twist of fate, the very adaptations that had made Smilodon such a successful hunter of large prey now became a liability. Specialized to take down giants, Smilodon struggled to adapt to a world where those giants were disappearing. It was, in essence, too good at what it did, and when the world changed, it couldn't change with it. The extinction of Smilodon marked not just the end of a species, but the end of an era. It was the last of the saber-toothed cats, not just in the Americas, but worldwide. With its passing, a lineage that had dominated the planet for over 20 million years came to an end. Its legacy, however, still resonates in museum exhibits, in our imaginations, and as a reminder of the fragile balance between species and their environments. As we face our own period of rapid change, the lesson of Smilodon is clear. Survival requires adaptation. Mammoths were icons of the Ice Age, towering 11 feet tall, wrapped in shaggy armor, and tipping the scales at 6 tons. But here's the uncomfortable truth. They weren't the scariest things out there, not even close. Lurking in the same frozen wastelands was a creature that made mammoths look quaint, a beast so massive, so brutally engineered, it was less an animal and more a biological battering ram. Imagine the size of a mammoth, but fused with the destructive force of a medieval war machine. This was no gentle giant. It didn't need curved tusks or a coat to command respect. All it had, all it needed, was a single monstrous weapon, one so lethal, so precise, that every encounter became a high-stakes gamble with survival. This was the true juggernaut of the Ice Age, Elasmotherium sibericum, the creature that should have defined Ice Age dominance from the very beginning. Imagine a rhinoceros that decided regular size wasn't nearly intimidating enough. Now multiply that by roughly 3, add the bulk of a small elephant, and crown it with a single horn, so massive it could serve as a battering ram for medieval warfare. What you're picturing is still probably smaller than the reality of Elasmotherium. This wasn't just large, it was monumentally, almost absurdly oversized. A standing 6.5 feet at the shoulder and stretching 15 feet from nose to tail, Elasmotherium weighed in at a staggering 5 tons of pure horn-equipped muscle. But the mements alone don't capture the true horror of encountering this beast. The defining feature, the element that transformed Elasmotherium from merely large to genuinely nightmarish, was the horn. Not horns, plural, like its modern rhinoceros descendants, but a single, massive horn that could reach lengths of up to 6 feet. 6 feet of solid pointed bone jutting from the center of its forehead like some prehistoric unicorn's fever dream. And unlike the mammoth's curved tusks, which were primarily tools for foraging and occasional defense, Elasmotherium's horn was purpose-built for devastation. It was perfectly positioned for charging attacks, designed to concentrate the full force of 5 tons of angry herbivore into a single armor-piercing point. Any creature unfortunate enough to find itself on the receiving end of an Elasmotherium charge wasn't just facing injury, it was facing obliteration. But the horn was just the beginning. Strip away that intimidating weapon, and you're still left with a creature that redefined what it meant to be perfectly adapted for the Ice Age. I've always been fascinated by the creatures that not only survived the Ice Age, but seemed to thrive in it. Mammoths, of course, come to mind, but they always struck me as oversized elephants struggling against the frozen conditions. Then there was Elasmotherium, a creature purpose-built for the harsh realities of that world. 5 tons of muscle and bone capable of a thundering full-speed charge. It could flatten anything in its path. Its legs weren't just weight-bearing supports, they were the foundation of a charging mechanism. Unlike the mammoth's thick, pillar-like limbs, Elasmotherium possessed legs that were both powerful and surprisingly agile, and its mass was front-loaded, designed to turn every charge into a catastrophic collision. Millions of years of brutal efficiency honed into one purpose: impact. The shoulder muscles alone were powerful enough to absorb the shock of high-speed collisions that would have shattered the bones of lesser creatures. But perhaps, most critically, Elasmotherium had solved the fundamental problem that plagued many Ice Age giants: energy efficiency. While mammoths required vast quantities of vegetation to fuel their massive bodies, Elasmotherium's digestive system was optimized for extracting maximum nutrition from the sparse grasses and tough vegetation that dominated the frozen steppes. It thrived in conditions that left other megafauna struggling. Its skull, built like a natural helmet, could withstand impacts that would have been fatal to creatures with more delicate cranial architecture. It wasn't just about protection. It was about turning the entire head into a weapon system. When Elasmotherium charged, it wasn't just the horn that posed a threat. It was the entire front end of the creature functioning as an organic siege engine. Mammoths relied on group protection and intimidation through size. Elasmotherium needed no such social strategies. It was a solitary predator's nightmare, capable of defending resources and territory through sheer individual dominance. While mammoths huddled together for warmth and protection, Elasmotherium stood alone because nothing else on the frozen landscape posed a credible threat. And then there was that magnificent, terrifying horn, up to 6 feet in length and potentially weighing as much as 100 pounds. This wasn't some decorative display piece. This was a weapon that could punch through ice, tree trunks, and presumably any creature unfortunate enough to challenge its owner. A horn longer than a standard parking space is wide, attached to a creature that could wield it with the precision of a medieval knight and the force of a freight train. The positioning was crucial. Unlike modern rhinoceroses, which carry their horns on their snouts, Elasmotherium's horn was mounted directly on the forehead, the optimal position for delivering devastating charging attacks. This placement meant that when the creature lowered its head to charge, the horn became the leading edge of a 5-ton projectile moving at 25 miles per hour. But the horn wasn't just a weapon. Analysis of its structure suggests it served multiple functions that gave Elasmotherium distinct advantages over its contemporaries. The base was broad and sturdy, enough to serve as a snowplow, allowing the creature to clear feeding areas that would have been inaccessible to other herbivores. In a world where food was scarce and competition was fierce, this ability to access buried vegetation was literally a matter of life and death. The horn's surface was likely covered in keratin, structured for maximum durability. This covering would have been constantly growing and self-sharpening, ensuring that the weapon remained effective throughout the creature's lifetime. Unlike antlers that shed annually, this horn was a permanent, ever-improving tool. Recent fossil evidence suggests the horn may have been even more formidable than previously imagined. Some specimens show evidence of horn bases that could have supported structures up to 8 feet long. An 8-foot horn on a 5-ton creature represents a level of natural weaponry that has no modern equivalent. Imagine being a saber-toothed cat or cave bear, creatures that were accustomed to being the apex predators of their environments, suddenly encountering something that could impale you from 8 feet away. The horn didn't just change how Elasmotherium fought. It changed how everything else on the Ice Age landscape had to live, constantly aware that somewhere in the frozen wilderness there was a creature carrying a weapon that could end any confrontation before it truly began. Vast, open grasslands stretched for thousands of miles. The silence surrounding the extinction of the Elasmotherium is genuinely haunting. This was an animal that once defined the Ice Age landscape, vanished with barely a trace. The mammoth survival story, impressive as it is, suddenly seems less like triumph and more like luck. They weren't necessarily better adapted. For a creature built like a living battering ram, the landscape of occasional river valleys and scattered patches of woodland was paradise. No dense forest to navigate, no steep terrain to negotiate, just endless expanses of territory where speed, power, and intimidation ruled supreme. What makes their territorial dominance truly remarkable is that they weren't just surviving in these conditions. They were thriving in areas where other megafauna couldn't establish permanent populations. The frozen steppes of Siberia, the windswept plains of Kazakhstan, the harsh grasslands of Central Asia, these were Elasmotherium's hunting grounds. Territories where the combination of extreme cold, sparse vegetation, and brutal competition eliminated most other large herbivores. The secret, I believe, lay in their approach to resource management. While mammoth herds required vast areas to support their numbers, moving constantly to find sufficient food, Elasmotherium operated on a different principle entirely. They were territorial specialists, claiming specific ranges and defending them with aggressive efficiency that made migration unnecessary. That horn wasn't just a weapon. It was a property deed written in bone and enforced through violence. Consider the advantages this gave them during the harshest periods of the Ice Age. When food became scarce and competition intensified, mammoth herds had to keep moving, constantly searching for new feeding grounds while burning precious calories in the process. Elasmotherium simply cleared their territory of competitors and settled in for the long haul. They could access buried vegetation that other creatures couldn't reach, defend prime feeding areas that others couldn't claim, and maintain energy reserves that migration-dependent species couldn't match. The fossil record tells a story of creatures that weren't just surviving, they were prospering. Elasmotherium remains have been found across a range that stretched from Ukraine to Mongolia, a distribution that suggests not desperate wandering, but successful territorial expansion. These weren't refugees from climate change. They were the landlords of the Ice Age, collecting rent in the form of exclusive access to the best grazing areas. And unlike mammoth populations, which fluctuated dramatically with environmental changes, Elasmotherium populations remained relatively stable throughout their existence. This wasn't luck. It was the natural result of a survival strategy so effective that it made them nearly immune to the environmental press that devastated other megafauna. For a creature so perfectly adapted to Ice Age conditions, so dominant in its chosen environment, and so well equipped for survival, Elasmotherium's extinction presents one of paleontology's most perplexing mysteries. How do you eliminate something that appeared virtually indestructible? While mammoths managed to survive in various forms until roughly 4,000 years ago, with some populations persisting on isolated islands well into human civilization, Elasmotherium vanished from the fossil record around 39,000 years ago. This wasn't a gradual decline. It was a sudden, complete disappearance that left no descendants and precious few clues about what could have overwhelmed such a formidable creature. The conventional explanation points to climate change, but this theory has some serious problems. Elasmotherium had already survived multiple ice ages, numerous warming periods, and dramatic environmental shifts throughout its history. These were creatures that had proven themselves capable of adapting to changing conditions over millions of years. Why would this particular climate shift prove fatal when so many previous ones had been survived. Some researchers suggest human hunting pres, but again the evidence doesn't quite add up. While humans were certainly present in Elasmotherium's range during the late Pleistocene, the idea that early human populations could have systematically eliminated creatures this large and dangerous seems optimistic at best. Remember, we're talking about 5-ton animals armed with 6-foot horns and the temperament of a cornered badger. Even with primitive weapons, the cost-benefit analysis of hunting such creatures seems questionable. The most disturbing possibility is that Elasmotherium's very dominance contributed to its downfall. Their territorial nature, while advantageous during stable periods, may have prevented them from adapting to rapidly changing conditions. Unlike mammoths, which could migrate to more favorable areas, Elasmotherium populations may have been too committed to their territories to abandon them when conditions deteriorated. But here's the truly unsettling part. The disappearance was so complete that, for centuries, scientists weren't even Elasmotherium had existed at all. Unlike mammoth remains, which are found regularly and in excellent condition, Elasmotherium fossils are rare and often fragmentary. It's almost as if something deliberately erased them from the archaeological record. Recent discoveries have added new layers to this mystery. Some fossils show evidence of stress markers and nutritional deficiencies that suggest the final populations were struggling with environmental press. Others display unusual growth patterns that might indicate disease or genetic problems. The picture emerging is of a species that didn't just disappear. It collapsed suddenly and catastrophically. Taken together, the evidence paints a grim picture. Whatever eliminated Elasmotherium was powerful enough to bring down a creature that had reigned unchallenged for ages, resilient, dominant, and built to endure. And yet it vanished with barely a trace. Elasmotherium. It wasn't just another Ice Age animal. It was the pinnacle of prehistoric power, a creature so finely tuned to its environment that it redefined what dominance looked like. The mammoth may have gotten the fame, but Elasmotherium earned the title that mattered most, the real titan of the Ice Age. But Elasmotherium wasn't the only behemoth history forgot. Another titan, far to the south, was the definition of giant altogether. Bigger than a mammoth, heavier than a T-Rex, and possibly the largest land mammal to ever walk the earth. When we envision the world that shaped our earliest ancestors, I think we typically imagine a landscape dominated by predators. Saber-toothed cats stalking the savanna, massive hyenas lurking near waterholes, and early humans huddled around fires for protection. But what if one of the most significant competitors our ancestors faced wasn't a carnivore at all, but another primate? One so massive it would tower over any human alive today? Meet Dinopithecus ingens, the terrible ape of Pleistocene Africa. Standing over 1.5 meters tall, around 5 feet, and weighing up to 150 kilograms or 330 pounds, it was nearly 5 times heavier than today's largest baboons. These colossal primates shared the African landscape with Australopithecus, an early Homo species, between roughly 3 to 2 million years ago. Yet, despite their imposing presence during this pivotal chapter of prehistory, they remain virtually unknown outside of specialized scientific circles. Dinopithecus belongs to the family Cercopithecidae, the Old World monkeys, rather than the hominid family. Specifically, it's classified within the subfamily Populationinae, alongside modern baboons, geladas, and mangabeys. Despite this taxonomic distance from humans, Dinopithecus represents one of the most remarkable examples of primate gigantism in the fossil record. The genus first entered scientific literature in 1938 when paleontologist Robert Broom described Dinopithecus ingens, based on fossil remains from Sterkfontein, near Pretoria, South Africa. The name itself tells a story. Dino, from the Greek for terrible or fearfully great, Pithecus, meaning ape or monkey, and ingens, meaning huge in Latin. A fitting title for a creature that pushed the boundaries of what we thought primates could become. Subsequent discoveries have primarily come from cave sites in South Africa, including Kromdraai and Cooper's Cave, locations famously associated with early hominin remains. Fossil evidence includes partial skulls, mandibles, and postcranial elements that allow paleontologists to reconstruct its appearance and lifestyle. Most fossils date between 3 and 2 million years ago, placing Dinopithecus firmly in the Pleistocene epoch alongside early Australopithecus and Homo species. Physically, Dinopithecus was a scaled-up baboon built for terrestrial power. Its skull alone made up to 30 centimeters in males and featured an elongated muzzle, enlarged canines, and a prominent sagittal crest for anchoring massive jaw muscles, indicators of both feeding strength and male-male competition. The mandible was exceptionally robust, with a deep body adapted to handle powerful chewing forces far beyond what is seen in modern baboons. Dental analysis shows a heavy emphasis on grinding plant material. Large molars with thick enamel point to a diet that included fibrous vegetation, seeds, and tubers, foods that required prolonged mastication. These adaptations suggest Dinopithecus could exploit tough resources that smaller primates couldn't process efficiently, offering a survival edge in diverse or fluctuating environments. Still, for all that chewing power, it needed a body that could carry the weight. Literally. Though fossilized postcranial remains are fragmentary, they leave no doubt. This was a ground dweller built like a fortress. The bones are dense, the muscle attachments oversized, and the proportions suggest a primate that moved low and heavy. It wasn't agile, but it didn't need to be. It was stable, durable, a four-limbed tank that could traverse both woodland and savanna. Now, here's where the social structure gets fascinating. Sexual dimorphism in Dinopithecus was extreme, even more pronounced than in modern baboons. Males may have weighed up to twice as much as females and bore significantly larger canines and cranial crests. This suggests intense male competition, likely involving physical confrontations and dominance displays, a social structure where size directly translated to reproductive success. Yet all this leaves Dinopithecus somewhere in the middle of its ecosystem. Its size positioned it as a mesopredator, both hunter and hunted. It likely fed on fruits, seeds, roots, and small animals, while remaining vulnerable to apex predators like saber-toothed cats or large hyenas. Its bulk, strength, and potential for aggressive defense would have made it a formidable opponent, one that early hominins may have respected, avoided, or even competed with. Modern baboons are notoriously territorial, confrontational, and quick to violence when threatened. And Dinopithecus almost certainly took that to the extreme. With large, dominant males leading the charge, a threatened troop could have erupted into an explosion of noise, displays, and physical retaliation. Raised hackles, deafening vocalizations, and jaw-clapping would have been the first warning. But if that didn't work, those massive canines weren't just for show. A provoked Dinopithecus, especially a protective male, could have delivered devastating bites and powerful strikes capable of injuring or killing mid-sized predators. Some paleontologists estimate Dinopithecus could have delivered bite forces comparable to those of big cats, perhaps reaching or even exceeding 2,000 pounds of crushing force. I can only imagine the sight of a defensive circle of 10 to 20 large-bodied primates bristling with muscle and rage. It would have been a serious deterrent to even the largest carnivores, or even to early hominins. This was no creature that backed down easily. It simply didn't need to. During the time when Dinopithecus thrived, South Africa was undergoing significant climatic shifts. For a primate of its size, these changes brought both unique challenges and new opportunities. Forests were gradually giving way to more open woodlands and grasslands, a transition that favored adaptable ground-dwelling species. Fossil sites where Dinopithecus remains have been found suggest it inhabited a mosaic landscape, open savanna interspersed with woodlands and riverine forests. It's an environment not unlike those preferred by modern baboons. Troop life in Dinopithecus likely mirrored that of modern baboons, but on a far more intimidating scale. These multi-male, multi-female groups were probably structured around rigid dominance hierarchies. Adult males asserted their rank through visual displays and, when necessary, brutal physical confrontations. Some of these males weighed up to 150 kilos. These clashes were anything but subtle. Adult males likely positioned themselves on the outskirts of the troop, forming a living barrier against potential predators. At dawn, the group would descend from cliffs or tall trees, safe havens used to avoid nocturnal hunters. From there, the day began with movement and lots of eating. Feeding likely consumed much of the daylight hours. Adult males may have needed up to 7 kilograms of plant matter daily: grasses, seeds, fruits, bulbs, and tubers, all requiring tremendous chewing power. And while plants formed the base of their diet, they weren't strictly herbivores. Like their modern relatives, Dinopithecus likely supplemented with animal protein, small vertebrates, insects, and scavenged carcasses. But here's the twist. With their size and strength, they may have taken things further. Juvenile antelope or the young of larger prey animals weren't out of the question. And when it came to disputed carcasses, their bulk alone may have been enough to intimidate other predators into backing off. Much like modern papionins, Dinopithecus likely relied on a rich set of vocalizations, facial cues, body postures, and physical contact. With brains scaled to their size and complex social structures to manage, their interactions were probably just as nuanced, broadcasting everything from individual rank to predator warnings with a glance or a grunt. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of Dinopithecus is its temporal and geographic overlap with early human species. Between approximately 3 and 2 million years ago, as Dinopithecus roamed the South African landscape, the hominin presence was undergoing a period of remarkable change. Species like Australopithecus were being joined by early Homo. Upright walking had become well established, brain sizes were growing, and the first stone tools were appearing. This was the crucible of humanity, and Dinopithecus was there to witness it. The fossil evidence places Dinopithecus in direct association with hominin remains at several critical sites. At Swartkrans and Cooper's Cave in South Africa's cradle of humankind, Dinopithecus fossils have been found in the same deposits as Australopithecus robustus and early Homo specimens. This wasn't just proximity across a landscape. These primates inhabited the same immediate environments, drank from the same water sources, sheltered in the same cave systems, and likely observed each other regularly. The size disparity alone would have created a power imbalance. Early hominins stood approximately 1.2 to 1.5 meters tall and weighed between 30 to 55 kilo. They would have been significantly outmatched by adult male Dinopithecus, which averaged around 80 kilos, with larger individuals reaching up to 150 kilos. Armed with formidable canines and superior upper body strength, even the smaller female Dinopithecus would have presented a physical threat. Competition for resources was inevitable. Both groups were omnivorous with overlapping dietary preferences, though with different specializations. Early hominins were developing adaptations for a more versatile diet, including meat obtained through scavenging and possibly hunting, while Dinopithecus likely specialized in efficiently processing large quantities of plant materials. Nevertheless, both would have sought out the same high-value food resources, fruits, nuts, tubers, and water sources, creating potential conflict points. And it wasn't just diet that brought them into contact. Both groups favored mosaic environments, offering a mix of woodlands for shelter and open areas for foraging. Both likely needed trees or cliff faces for nighttime safety from predators. Both would have been drawn to reliable water sources, particularly during dry seasons. This shared preference for similar habitats would have end regular encounters between the species. The responses of early hominins to Dinopithecus were likely complex and situational. Direct competition was probably avoided when possible, with hominins developing greater behavioral flexibility to compensate for their physical disadvantage. This might have included adjusting activity patterns to avoid peak Dinopithecus feeding times, developing more efficient foraging strategies, or utilizing tools to access food resources unavailable to even the powerful Dinopithecus. One intriguing possibility is that the presence of Dinopithecus may have accelerated hominin tool use and cooperation. When confronted with larger, more physically imposing competitors, our ancestors, the thought that really sticks with me is this. Imagine a creature so dominant, so ferocious, that even mammoths trembled. That was the dire wolf. Known in ancient Greece as the terrible wolf, it was an apex predator with jaws powerful enough to tear through bone. It's fascinating to consider the dire wolf's diet and hunting skills. Their bodies were clearly designed for a meat-heavy lifestyle. Their teeth, digestive systems, even their skeletons all point to their prowess as hunters. They roamed across vast landscapes from North America to South America and even into Asia. In North America, they hunted bison and ground sloths. In South America, they preyed on glyptodons and mastodons. And in Asia, they faced off against woolly mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses. They weren't alone, of course. They competed with saber-toothed cats, American lions, and giant short-faced bears. The La Brea tar pits offer a glimpse into their world, a place where dire wolves outnumbered gray wolves 5-1, a testament to their dominance even amidst challenging conditions. They lived in monogamous pairs, hunted in packs, and displayed a fierce determination to survive. The origin of the dire wolf has always been a puzzle. One theory suggested they evolved from Eurasian canines, while another proposed they emerged from an ancestral lineage native to the Americas. For years, the mystery remained, and scientists tried to extract DNA from fossils, but they kept running into issues with tar residue. Then finally, in 2021, a breakthrough. Scientists managed to extract nuclear DNA from dire wolf fossils, revealing that they represent a unique genetic lineage that split from wolf-like canines nearly 6 million years ago. This discovery supports the theory that dire wolves originated in the Americas, separate from the genus Canis. Despite their skeletal similarities to gray wolves, they aren't closely related, a fascinating example of convergent evolution, where different species independently develop similar traits. The dire wolf truly stands apart as a unique and magnificent creature. Before the dire wolf, there was another species that met a similar fate. It makes you wonder about the press that shaped evolution, doesn't it? Consider Dinopithecus. It's possible that early humans were porosity into technological innovation and stronger social bonds simply by sharing a landscape with these megamonkeys. The ability to use tools to crack nuts, dig for tubers, or coordinate group defense would have been incredibly valuable. And then there were the predators. Both Dinopithecus and early hominins faced threats from big cats, hyenas, and crocodiles. It's even possible that Dinopithecus troops inadvertently provided protection for nearby hominins, deterring predators. Conversely, a small group of hominins might have attracted predators, putting nearby Dinopithecus at risk. Dinopithecus eventually vanished around 1.7 million years ago. Climate change likely played a significant role, disrupting their food supply and shelter. Competition from smaller, more adaptable baboons may have also contributed, as shifting environments favored generalists. And the rise of Homo erectus added new challenges, with increased competition for resources. Predation dynamics may have shifted as well, and disease could have also played a role. Ultimately, the very traits that once made Dinopithecus successful, like large size and dietary specialization, may have led to its decline. Its extinction mirrors a broader trend of large-bodied species disappearing, not suddenly, but through gradual decline. The story of the dire wolf spans an impressive 40 million years. It began with the arrival of the canid family in North America. What I find fascinating is how, from fox-like vulpini to dog-like canini, the diverse branches of this family tree showcase such intriguing variations. Dire wolf fossils have been discovered in so many different habitats across North and South America. Plains, grasslands, forested mountain areas, even arid savannas. The most fossil-abundant areas seem to be the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles and the Tule Springs in Nevada. While dire wolf remains are less common at high latitudes in North America, recent discoveries of Asian dire wolf fossils have challenged previous theories about their range. I've read that fossils have been reported in various states in the United States, with major sites located east of the Rocky Mountains. Dire wolf fossils have also been uncovered in various locations across Mexico, particularly in the San Josecito Cave and El Cedazo. And they've even been found in South America, with specimens dated to less than 17,000 years ago, in countries including Venezuela, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and Ecuador. The discovery of a dire wolf fossil in northeastern China back in 2020 suggests a possible migration route. It seems they may have traveled from mid-latitude North America, across Beringia, and into Eurasia. That certainly challenges previous assumptions about barriers to their dispersal. Understanding the physical characteristics of dire wolves really sheds light on their remarkable adaptations and behaviors. The dire wolf was similar in proportions to modern North American wolves, like the Yukon wolf and northwestern wolf, though it exhibited variations in size and morphology. Some dire wolf specimens from Rancho La Brea were smaller than the largest northern wolves we see today, while others were larger. The dire wolf had smaller feet and a larger head compared to modern wolves of similar body size, with a massive skull characterized by broader dimensions and a higher sagittal crest. Geographic differences were also observed, with specimens from California and Mexico showing distinct craniodental features and limb proportions compared to those from east of the Continental Divide. Some had shorter and lighter limbs, making them less adapted for running than timber wolves and coyotes, while others possessed longer limbs, comparable to the Yukon wolf. Around 125,000 years ago, dire wolves roamed the earth when the sea level was 8 meters higher than today, during the Sangamonian Interglacial. The Wisconsin Glacial period followed, lasting from 80,000 to 20,000 years ago, also known as the Ice Age, with glaciers covering much of North America. Dire wolves went extinct 9,500 years ago, marking the end of a unique era. Research indicates that dire wolves evolved separately from modern North American gray wolves and coyotes, without genetic mixing. The reasons for their extinction remain debated. It likely involved factors such as climate change, competition with other predators, and changes in prey availability. The disappearance of dire wolves marked the end of a unique lineage within the Canidae family, and potentially altered predator-prey dynamics at the time. Between 125,000 and 9,500 years ago, significant climatic shifts occurred, shaping the environment in which dire wolves lived. These changes, alongside fluctuations in prey populations, likely influenced the dire wolves' survival. Dire wolves existed in diverse habitats ranging from grasslands to forests, adapting to various environmental conditions. As apex predators, they played a crucial role in regulating ecosystems, impacting the populations of herbivores and smaller predators. Their extinction represented a loss of biodiversity and disrupted ecological balances established over millennia. While interbreeding is known among wolf-like canines, studies have found no evidence of genetic mixing between dire wolves and extant North American gray wolves or coyotes, suggesting independent evolution. The exact reasons for dire wolf extinction remain a subject of debate, with factors such as climate change, competition with other predators, and changes in prey availability likely playing a role. Reflecting on the era of the dire wolf, Its formidable presence and powerful bite force certainly captivate my imagination. But in the grand tapestry of Earth's history, few chapters are as captivating as the rise and fall of the dinosaurs. These magnificent creatures dominated our planet for over 160 million years, shaping ecosystems and adapting into a myriad of forms that continue to captivate our imagination. But as the curtain fell on the age of reptiles, it gave way to an unexpected sequel, one where the supporting characters stepped into the spotlight and nearly stole the show. Enter the forest racids, more commonly known as the terror birds. These feathered nightmares emerged from the ashes of the dinosaur extinction, carrying the torch of their terrifying predecessors and proving that nature abhors a vacuum, especially when it comes to apex predators. Roughly 53 million years ago, in the early Eocene, the world was a very different place, a hothouse Earth with lush forests stretching from pole to pole, filled with a diverse range of life forms that emerged after the extinction of the dinosaurs. It was in this steamy prehistoric paradise that the first terror bird, Paleopsilopterus, made its debut. Standing at a modest height of 1 meter or 3 feet, this Brazilian bird might not have seemed particularly terrifying at first glance. In fact, it was about the same size as a modern-day stork. Hardly the stuff of nightmares, but appearances can be deceiving, and Paleopsilopterus had something its contemporaries lacked: potential. What set Paleopsilopterus apart was its agility and speed, traits that would become hallmarks of its descendants. While it may not have been the apex predator of its time, dwarfed by monstrous crocodilians and giant snakes, it was a harbinger of things to come. I sometimes find myself wondering what the early mammals of Europe thought when they first encountered a terror bird. Imagine the shock of these creatures, used to their own predators, suddenly confronted with a taste of South American terror. The terror birds, you see, weren't content to stay in the Americas. One species, Eleuthernis, actually spread its wings across the sea to Europe. Fossil remains have been found in France and Switzerland, making it the only known member of its family to have lived outside the New World. But even as Eleuthernis was making this journey, nature was already planning the next stage for these avian predators. They were getting bigger. Just 3 million years after Paleopsilus took its first steps, Eleuthernis emerged, already 50% taller than its ancestor. The epochs rolled by, and the terror birds continued to grow, adapt, and diversify. It was as if they were engaged in a relentless competition with themselves, each new species trying to outdo its predecessors in size and ferocity. Then came the Oligocene epoch, roughly 34 to 23 million years ago. This marked a turning point. The family truly began to live up to its name with the emergence of giants that would have given pause to even the bravest of prey. Paraphosaurus, a Brazilian bird, was an absolute behemoth. It stood 1.4 meters or 4.5 feet tall and weighed a whopping 180 kilograms or 400 pounds. To put that into perspective, Paraphosaurus outweighed the largest living bird today, the ostrich. This was no lightweight contender. It was built like a feathered tank. Paleontologists believe that Paraphosaurus hunted using a combination of kicks, slashes, and powerful jabs with its sharp beak. A prehistoric version of mixed martial arts, perhaps. And Paraphosaurus wasn't just a mindless brute. Like many of its terror bird kin, it likely possessed a level of intelligence that set it apart from other contemporary predators. Studies of terror bird brain cases suggest that they had well-developed visual and auditory centers, indicating keen senses that would have made them formidable hunters. But as impressive as Paraphosaurus was, it was merely setting the stage for what was to come. The Miocene and Pliocene epochs, spanning from about 23 to 2.5 million years ago, brought forth the true giants of the terror bird family. These were creatures that pushed the boundaries of what it meant to be a bird, reaching sizes that rivaled the predatory dinosaurs of old. Three names stand out in this pantheon of avian terrors: Titanus, Kelenkin, and Brontornis. Each of these genera represents the pinnacle of the terror bird lineage, and each had its own claim to fame. Titanus, the youngest and smallest of the trio, was also the most adventurous. While most terror birds were content to dominate South America, Titanus had grander ambitions. It crossed the newly formed land bridge connecting North and South America during the Great American Interchange, becoming the only large South American predator to successfully establish itself in North America. This bird lived in what is now the United States, including the states of Texas, Florida, and California. Standing 2 meters, or 6.6 feet tall, Titanus would have been an imposing sight for the mammals of North America. Imagine the shock of a Pleistocene horse or ground sloth, accustomed to watching out for saber-toothed cats and dire wolves, suddenly confronted by this alien predator, half bird, half nightmare. But as impressive as Titanus was, it was dwarfed by its cousins back in South America. Kelenkin, named after a mythological Tehuelche spirit, stood a towering 3 meters, or 9.8 feet tall, and weighed around 250 kilograms, or 550 pounds. This was a bird the size of a grizzly bear, with a head larger than that of a horse and a beak that could crush bone. Recent studies have shown that Kelenkin and other large terror birds possessed a unique skull structure that set them apart from their smaller relatives. Known as the terror bird skull type, this adaptation gave them increased bite force and pecking power. This suggests that these giants may have been capable of taking down larger prey than previously thought, potentially including some of the megafauna that roamed South America during their reign. The title of the largest terror bird, however, is still hotly debated, with Brontornis giving Kelenkin a run for its money. While slightly shorter at 2.8 meters, or 9.2 feet, Brontornis was built like a feathered bulldozer, potentially weighing up to 400 kilograms, or 880 pounds. This made it not just the heaviest terror bird, but also the heaviest carnivorous bird of all time, and the 4th heaviest bird overall. Interestingly, Brontornis has been the subject of scientific controversy. Some paleontologists have questioned whether it was truly a terror bird or even a carnivore at all, citing similarities in its toe claws to those of herbivorous birds. However, recent studies have identified features in Brontornis's vertebrae that are unique to terror birds, lending weight to its classification as a member of this fearsome family. Whether Brontornis was a terror bird or not, its massive size would have made it a force to be reckoned with. Its weight likely made it slower than its more nimble cousins, but what it lacked in speed, it made up for in raw power. I imagine Brontornis as the tank of the terror bird world, terror birds. The name alone conjures an image of a prehistoric nightmare, a feathered predator ruling its world. But what truly fascinates me isn't just their size or their fearsome beaks. It's the sensory capabilities that put them leagues ahead of their contemporaries. Recent studies of terror bird skulls and brain cases reveal just how well equipped these creatures were. While size and power certainly played a role for giant terror birds, many relatives went a different route. Speed, it seems, was just as important. The structure of terror bird leg bones is remarkably similar to that of modern-day ostriches. Short thigh bones paired with elongated lower leg and foot bones. This is a clear indicator of high-speed running ability. Paleontologists estimate that many terror birds, including some of the larger species like Titanus, could have reached speeds exceeding 30 miles per hour, or faster than Usain Bolt, while standing twice as tall and weighing several times as much. But speed wasn't just about chasing prey. For many terror birds, especially the smaller and medium-sized species, it was also a crucial defensive adaptation. In a world filled with other large predators, including giant carnivorous mammals and enormous crocodilians, the ability to make a quick getaway could mean the difference between life and death. This combination of speed and size made terror birds versatile predators capable of adapting to a variety of hunting strategies. Smaller, faster species might have specialized in chasing down swift prey like small mammals and reptiles, while the larger, more powerful species could have employed ambush tactics or even taken on larger, more dangerous quarry. Terror birds might not have had eyesight quite as sharp as modern raptors, but they were far from visually impaired. Their eyes were well developed and positioned to provide excellent depth perception, a crucial advantage for any predator. What really set their vision apart was its versatility. These birds were equally adept at seeing in bright daylight and in the dim light of dawn and dusk, making them effective hunters around the clock. And then there's their hearing. The inner ear structure of terror birds suggests an acute sensitivity to low-frequency sounds. This ability would have allowed them to detect the footsteps and movements of potential prey, even when hidden by dense vegetation. I imagine a terror bird standing motionless in the prehistoric forests of South America, its head cocked slightly to one side. To a casual observer, it might appear to be resting or even dozing, but in reality, every fiber of its being is alert, its incredibly sensitive ears picking up the faintest rustle of leaves or the softest patter of tiny feet. In an instant, it can pinpoint the location of its unsuspecting prey and launch into action. This combination of visual and auditory prowess made terror birds the complete predatory package. It's no wonder these birds were able to dominate their ecosystems for millions of years. But even the mightiest rulers faced their downfall, and the reign of the terror birds was no exception. For millions of years, these avian predators had ruled supreme in South America, developing into a diverse array of species that filled various ecological niches. But somewhere along the line, their luck ran out. Traditionally, the extinction of the terror birds was linked to the Great American Interchange, a major paleozoographic event that occurred about 2.7 million years ago. This event saw the formation of the Isthmus of Panama, creating a land bridge between North and South America. As a result, animals from both continents were able to migrate across this newly formed connection, leading to a significant reshuffling of fauna. The conventional wisdom held that the influx of new predators from North America, including cats, dogs, and bears, outcompeted the terror birds, leading to their eventual extinction. It was a neat and tidy explanation that seemed to make perfect sense. However, as is often the case in science, the truth has turned out to be more complex and nuanced. Recent studies have cast doubt on this simple competition-based extinction model, revealing a more intricate tapestry of factors that led to the terror bird's downfall. One of the primary challenges to the competition hypothesis comes from a closer examination of the fossil record. It turns out that most terror birds, along with many of their main South American competitors, had already disappeared long before placental predators arrived in South America in significant numbers. This timing mismatch suggests that something else was at play. Moreover, the success of Titanus in North America serves as a counterpoint to the idea that terror birds couldn't compete with placental mammals. Not only did Titanus successfully expand its range northward during the interchange, but it also managed to coexist with large canids and felines for millions of years. Clearly, at least some terror birds were more than capable of holding their own against mammalian predators. So, if competition alone didn't doom the terror birds, what did? The answer, as is often the case in paleontology, likely involves a complex interplay of factors. Climate change, in particular, may have played a significant role. From the Oligocene to the Pliocene, Earth's climate was on a long-term cooling trend, culminating in a series of ice ages. This global cooling would have had a profound impact on the ecosystems that terror birds called home. As temperatures dropped and habitats changed, the lush forests that many terror bird species relied on would have given way to more open landscapes. The idea that terror birds survived almost to the cusp of human arrival in South America, it haunts me. Imagine our ancestors encountering these feathered giants. What would that have been like? Could there be truth to the legends of giant birds that persist in the folklore of some South American cultures? While direct interaction seems unlikely, the possibility that early humans heard stories of these creatures passed down through generations, it's not entirely far-fetched. Other megafauna, like woolly mammoths and giant ground sloths, coexisted with early humans, leaving lasting impressions on human culture and mythology. The near miss between humans and terror birds serves as a poignant reminder of the incredible diversity of life that has existed on our planet. It's sobering to think that if the terror birds had managed to hang on for just a few thousand years longer, our understanding of the natural world might be very different today. In the face of changing environments, terror birds proved remarkably resilient. For years, we believed they went extinct around 1 million years ago, but new fossil evidence has dramatically altered that timeline. Some smaller species have now been dated to as recently as 96,000 years ago. Even more tantalizing is the discovery of fossils attributed to an unidentified terror bird species in a formation dated to just 18,000 years ago. Of course, not all terror birds adapted. Some of the larger, more specialized species struggled to find enough prey to sustain their massive bodies. The influx of new competitors from North America added further priz. But let's shift gears for a moment. In the thick forests of the past, another apex predator reigned supreme, the Tyrannosaurus rex. It struck terror into any animal that encountered it. Its seismic movements and razor-sharp teeth, this dinosaur has always been regarded as the pinnacle of prehistoric might. Even today, its reputation endures as the most frightening being to have ever walked the planet. So, just how terrifying was the T-Rex, actually? The first known fragment of a T-Rex skeleton was discovered in Montana in 1902 by paleontologist Barnum Brown. This discovery marked the beginning of a new era in dinosaur research, sparking interest among many people in learning more about them. Major finds, particularly the virtually complete specimen Sioux, discovered in South Dakota, have since offered invaluable information on the morphology, behavior, and scientific significance of Tyrannosaurus rex. Researchers have pieced together the history of this giant predator and its role as a prominent apex predator throughout the late Cretaceous period through thorough excavation, evaluation, and reconstruction. T-Rex and other large theropod dinosaurs like Tarbosaurus and Daspeltosaurus are classified as members of the subfamily Tyrannosaurini within the family Tyrannosauridae. Tyrannosaurus rex, one of the last and most widely recognized tyrannosaurid species, represents the top predators of the late Cretaceous era and is a key figure in the evolution of dinosaurs. Stretching to insane lengths, T-Rex boasted a muscular body that could extend up to 12 meters, a distance rivaling the size of a typical school bus, from the tip of its formidable snout to the end of its tail. If paleontological speculation holds true, it's possible that certain specimens exceeded the monumental length of 13 meters, dwarfing any contemporary terrestrial predator. This imposing giant rose to a height of 6 meters at the hips. Imagine this enormously tall creature with two powerful legs bearing the weight of its massive frame, its head lifted high as it surveyed its realm with regal authority. Having acknowledged their immense size, the next big question that comes to mind is how heavy these remarkable creatures were. Estimates suggest that a T-Rex could weigh anywhere from 12 to 18 tons, with its skin and flesh covering its massive bones. To put that into perspective, it's similar to the weight of several small cars compressed into the form of one awe-inspiring predator. The Tyrannosaurus rex boasted a sturdy skeletal structure with a distinct vertebral column comprised of neck, back, and sacral vertebrae. The exact number of tail vertebrae varied, but its neck formed a muscular S-shaped curve supporting its massive head, while pneumatic depressions and robust neural spines provided strength and flexibility. The forelimbs were short with two clawed fingers, contrasting the long hind limbs, contributing to its imposing stature. The pelvis featured a lengthy ilium and a large pubic boot, while a hind foot had an arctometatarsalien metatarsus. Throughout its skeleton, many bones were hollowed, reducing weight without sacrificing strength, which was crucial for supporting its bulk. The Tyrannosaurus rex possessed skulls reaching up to 1.54 meters in length. That's about the size of an adult human. The skulls of Tyrannosaurus rex always fascinated me, They featured large fenestrae that reduced weight, showcasing unique adaptations. These included an extremely wide rear and a narrow snout, ensuring exceptional binocular vision. These skulls were composed of massive yet fused bones with pneumatized components and contributed to the tyrannosaurid trend of a powerful bite, far surpassing that of non-tyrannosaurids. The upper jaw's U-shaped tip allowed for the extraction of more tissue and bone with each bite, though it heightened stress on the front teeth. The teeth in the upper jaw exhibited prominent ridges and tips that curled backward like cutting tools, showing distinct heterodonty. The remaining teeth, robust and spaced, resembled lethal bananas. In mature individuals, the upper jaw housed larger teeth than the lower jaw, with the largest tooth discovered measuring 30.5 cm in length. I've noticed that numerous small openings were observed in both the upper and lower jaws, suggesting potential sensory functions or indications of external structures. Despite Tyrannosaurus rex's reputation for its massive jaws and teeth, I find it impossible to overlook its disproportionately small arms. Yet, some speculate these weren't useless remains, but deadly weapons used in hand-to-hand combat. Paleontologist Stephen Stanley suggests they were lethal weapons. At only 3 feet long, they had crescent-shaped claws, sharpened to a razor edge, capable of causing deadly injuries to unsuspecting prey. Picture the moment when the T-Rex advances towards its target with its huge head hanging above, its strong front limbs making rapid slashing movements, cutting through tissue and muscles with frightening accuracy. This suggests how the T-Rex hunted, showing its skill in quickly and effectively immobilizing its prey. Once thought to be useless structures, like wisdom teeth in humans or wings in flightless birds, the T-Rex's arms are now recognized as crucial weapons in its hunting tactics, adding to the fear of this prehistoric dominant predator. The portrayal of Tyrannosaurus rex in Jurassic Park movies emphasizes its poor eyesight, as characters often evade its notice by remaining still. However, recent scientific findings suggest otherwise. Paleontologists, drawing upon comparative anatomy and fossil evidence, theorize that the T-Rex likely had vision like contemporary predators like hawks, with the ability to detect both moving and stationary objects. This challenges its cinematic depiction and deepens our understanding of its sensory capabilities. Another perspective suggests the T-Rex was an adept ambush predator, utilizing its size, powerful jaws, and heightened senses to swiftly hunt prey. Conversely, some view it as a scavenger, feeding on carrion or scavenging from carcasses. These differing views underscore the complexity of the T-Rex's behavior and ecological role, fueling ongoing debates among researchers. Along with its extraordinary eyesight, the Tyrannosaurus rex possessed a remarkable sense of smell, akin to vultures today. This keen olfactory ability allowed it to spot objects up to 6 kilometers away under ideal conditions. In addition to its sharp senses, the T-Rex excelled at hunting due to its quick speed. Able to detect prey from a distance, it could pursue its targets at speeds reaching 25 mph, a pace comparable to the world record sprinting speed of Usain Bolt. Imagine yourself wandering in a primeval environment, trying to navigate back to safety, the noises of the woods echoing in the background. Suddenly, a tremendous noise halts you in your tracks. The Tyrannosaurus rex is approaching, causing your heart to race, Desperately trying to escape the advancing creature, you sprint frantically, your feet pounding on the forest floor, yet you feel the earth tremble under your feet as the T-Rex closes in. Glancing back, you see its massive silhouette with gleaming sharp teeth under the sun's rays. Realizing to no escape, the T-Rex's jaws close on you with incredible force. 50 to 60 teeth, each as big as a banana, pierce your skin simultaneously, sending waves of agony through your body. In that horrifying moment, you experience the true terror of being hunted by the most formidable predator to ever roam the earth. The feeding and diet of the Tyrannosaurus rex were integral to its dominance as a top predator during the late Cretaceous period. With its massive size and powerful jaws filled with serrated teeth, T-Rex was a formidable carnivore. Its diet primarily consisted of large, herbivorous dinosaurs, such as Triceratops and Ankylosaurus, which were among the toughest dinosaurs of their time and were preyed upon by T-Rex. Additionally, at times T-Rex would also prey upon other large carnivorous dinosaurs, showcasing its fearsome predatory prowess. For example, it's believed that T-Rex may have occasionally targeted individuals of its own kind or even formidable predators, demonstrating the sheer dominance and terror of this apex predator. The Tyrannosaurus rex had a significant impact on its surroundings beyond its role as an efficient hunter. Its presence necessitated changes in the behavior of other animals. Some dinosaurs developed defenses such as speed or armor to evade its attacks, while others sought refuge in dense forests or migrated to new areas. As the dominant predator, T-Rex reshaped prey distribution and population dynamics, influencing ecological balance and predator-prey relationships. The Tyrannosaurus rex shared its environment with a diverse array of other dinosaurs, each possessing unique adaptations and behaviors. Among these were Edmontosaurus, Triceratops, Stegosaurus, Torosaurus, Albertosaurus, Pachycephalosaurus, Dinosaurus, Ornithomimus, and Anzu. The T-Rex's formidable presence. Forget the horned helmets and storm-tossed seas you might imagine when you think of Vikings. I've been studying the sagas, and I've come to believe they faced something far more terrifying than rival raiders. Colossal, powerful creatures, almost ripped from legend. These weren't just animals. They were giants of a dying world, beasts that could crush ships and skewer warriors in an instant. Armed with iron blades and wooden shields, the Vikings didn't just conquer lands. They battled nature itself in clashes so intense they became legends whispered for centuries. The first beast our Norse ancestors regularly encountered was the magnificent aurochs, wild cattle unlike anything alive today. Standing at a towering 6 feet at the shoulder, these weren't your typical farm animals. A full-grown aurochs bull could weigh over 2,000 pounds, a muscular frame that dwarfed even the largest modern cattle breeds. What made aurochs truly intimidating were their enormous horns, curved weapons that could span over 3 feet from tip to tip. These weren't defensive tools. They were perfectly designed killing instruments. The forward-facing orientation allowed bulls to charge directly at threats with enough force to impale a fully armored warrior or even flip a small boat. Archaeological evidence suggests that aurochs' horns were often kept as trophies after successful hunts, becoming drinking vessels for the most prestigious Viking warriors. The relationship between Vikings and aurochs was more than just survival. It was woven into their very culture, leaving a mark on Norse art, symbolism, and even the warrior mindset. Hunting these beasts was a true test of courage for young Norse warriors. Unlike modern hunting, where distance and firearms provide safety, Viking hunters had to approach within spear-throwing range, close enough to smell the animal's breath. A charging aurochs could reach speeds of 22 miles per hour, leaving hunters with mere seconds to make their throw or face the consequences. I've seen many Norse graves that contain evidence of horn wounds, silent testimony to hunts gone wrong. By the Viking Age, aurochs populations were already declining across Europe due to habitat loss and hunting prez. The last known aurochs died in 1627 in Poland's Jaktora forest, long after the Viking era had ended. But the land wasn't the only domain where Vikings encountered magnificent creatures that have since vanished. The seas that formed their highways held their own vanished giants. If you sailed with Vikings across the North Atlantic, you would have witnessed an extraordinary sight along rocky coastlines. Colonies of thousands of black and white birds standing upright like tiny sentinels. The great auk, often called the original penguin, bore a striking resemblance to its southern hemisphere counterparts, despite having no direct relation. Standing about 2.5 feet tall, these flightless birds were perfectly adapted to the cold waters of the North Atlantic. Their wings had transformed into powerful flippers that propelled them through the ocean with remarkable speed. Measurements based on similar birds suggest they could fly underwater at up to 22 miles per hour. On land, however, they were awkwardly vulnerable, waddling upright on 2 legs, unable to take flight when danger approached. For Vikings, the great auk represented an almost absurdly convenient resource. Unlike most prey that required chasing, these birds couldn't flee effectively on land. Norse seafarers could simply walk among nesting colonies and select their victims. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements in Iceland, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands reveals vast quantities of great auk bones in kitchen middens, often showing cut marks consistent with meat removal. The great auk's waterproof feathers were prized for insulation and bedding. Its fat provided lamp oil, and its beaks became decorative items. A Viking burial in Norway even featured a necklace with 5 great auk beaks, hinting at both symbolic and practical value. Ironically, the bird's marine adaptations made it vulnerable, breeding only on a few remote islands, laying a single egg on rocky ground. By the Viking Age, human hunting had already forced some colonies to vanish. The great auk's final extinction didn't occur until 1844, when the last confirmed pair was killed on the island of Eldey off Iceland. A sad epilogue to a relationship that began when the first Norse ships reached their breeding grounds. The birds that had once numbered in the millions, forming colonies so vast they darkened shorelines, vanished because they had no natural defense against human predation. While Vikings ventured across vast oceans, the forests that surrounded their settlements held creatures just as remarkable and far more dangerous. Among these was a distinct forest giant that many researchers now believe represented a specialized hybrid population, the European forest elk, or skoggelg, a creature that combined characteristics of what we now classify as separate moose and elk species. Standing up to 7 feet at the shoulder with magnificent palmate antlers spanning up to 6 feet across, these forest giants were truly imposing. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements reveals distinctive antler configurations, unlike modern European moose populations, suggesting these animals represented a unique genetic lineage that has since disappeared through hunting prey and hybridization with other cervid populations. What made these forest elk particularly remarkable was their coloration and behavior. Unlike modern moose with their uniformly dark coats, the forest elk, as we call them now, were truly giants. Imagine an animal that could provide over 500 kilograms of meat, enough to feed a small village for weeks during the harsh northern winters. Their hides were tougher than cattle leather, perfect for shields and winter clothing, but perhaps most prized were their enormous antlers, transformed into tools, weapons, and even drinking horns for Viking kings. Cave paintings suggest these animals had distinctive light patches on their sides and shoulders, camouflage for the dappled forest light. They were reportedly more aggressive than modern moose, particularly during rooting season, actively defending territories. But by the late Viking Age, these elk populations were already declining. Intensive hunting and forest clearing fragmented their habitat across Scandinavia. Encounters with these magnificent beasts became rare, creatures of the remote wilderness. But these forest giants weren't the only creatures shaping Viking survival. Deep within Scandinavia's icy rivers swam another unexpected powerhouse, one just as valuable and equally dangerous. While spotting a whale today feels wondrous, for Viking sailors, such encounters often turned into high-stakes battles. Gray whales were a valuable prize, offering meat, oil, and bone. But hunting them meant rowing dangerously close, where a single thrash of the whale's tail could shatter a longship. Unlike most whale species that still inhabit northern seas, the Atlantic gray whale population was driven to complete extinction by the 18th century. During the Viking Age, however, these magnificent marine mammals were abundant, particularly in coastal waters. Atlantic gray whales reached lengths of 14 to 15 meters, comparable to modern gray whales in the Pacific, and weighed up to 36 tons, roughly the size of a Viking longship. Their mottled gray coloration, often covered with barnacles and whale lice, gave them a distinctive appearance that featured in Norse daeons of sea creatures. What made gray whales unique was their feeding strategy. Unlike deep-diving species, they were bottom feeders, plowing the seafloor for small invertebrates, creating massive mud plumes visible from the surface. This habit brought them into shallow coastal waters, precisely where Viking ships operated most frequently. For Norse communities, gray whales represented an extraordinary bounty when successfully hunted. A single whale could yield up to 20 tons of meat and blubber, enough to feed an entire Viking settlement through the harsh northern winter. Archaeological evidence shows specialized bone tools designed specifically for processing whale meat alongside huge cooking pits that could only have been used for creatures of this size. The hunting of gray whales wasn't without peril. Unlike passive species such as the right whale, gray whales were known for their aggressive defense when threatened. They would often charge attacking boats, using their massive flukes to smash wooden vessels to splinters. Norse sagas contain accounts of whaling expeditions ending in disaster, when cornered whales fought back, earning them the nickname devilfish among later whalers. What made Atlantic gray whales particularly vulnerable to hunting was their predictable migration patterns and coastal breeding grounds. Each year, they would travel along well-established routes between feeding areas in the north and calving grounds further south. Vikings, with their intimate knowledge of coastal geography, could anticipate these movements and set up ambush points where the whales would be channeled through narrow passages. By the late Viking Age, gray whale populations were already showing signs of depletion in areas of heaviest Norse settlement. The combination of increased whaling efficiency and the species' low reproductive rate set the stage for their eventual disappearance from Atlantic waters. But while Vikings battled colossal whales at sea, their struggles didn't end once they reached dry land. For the forests of Britain were home to predators just as fierce and far less predictable. In the late 8th century, when Viking longships first landed on the shores of Britain and Ireland, they entered territories where another formidable predator had long reigned supreme: the British wolf. These wolves, genetically distinct from their Scandinavian cousins, had dominated the British Isles for thousands of years before Norse settlers arrived to carve out new kingdoms. Standing taller than the Honshu wolf of Japan but smaller than modern timber wolves, British wolves typically reached heights of 70 to 85 centimeters at the shoulder and weighed between 30 to 45 kilos. Their thick, often gray-brown coats were adapted to the damp conditions of the British Isles, with distinctive white markings frequently appearing on their chests, a feature noted in several Viking-era daons. When Vikings first raided Lindisfarne in 793 CE, wolves remained common throughout Britain and Ireland, with packs controlling territories from the Scottish Highlands. I've often wondered what it must have been like to walk through the forests of southern England 1,000 years ago. Archaeological digs from early Viking settlements in the Hebrides and Northern Isles have turned up wolf bones bearing cut marks. It seems the newcomers wasted no time hunting these predators. For Vikings establishing permanent colonies in the British Isles, wolves were both a threat and an opportunity. Their attacks on livestock, especially sheep, which were so vital to the Norse economy in places like the Orkneys and Hebrides, naturally made them enemies of the settlers. Yet, these Viking warriors also respected the hunting prowess and pack coordination of wolves, qualities they themselves valued in battle. This complex relationship shows up in Norse place names that we still find across former Viking territories in Britain. Places like Olvadale, Wolf Valley in Cumbria, and Wolf Hill in Perthshire mark areas where Norse settlers frequently encountered these predators. Several Viking-era runestones discovered in northern England even depict wolf hunts, suggesting these dangerous pursuits held ceremonial significance for warriors establishing their prowess in new lands. British wolves also made their way into Viking folklore. As Norse settlers integrated with local populations, they adopted and transformed Celtic wolf myths into their own traditions. The wolf-warrior connection strengthened, with berserkers sometimes described wearing wolf pelts instead of bear skins. But the fate of British wolves was ultimately sealed not by Vikings, but by their descendants and successors. As Norse settlements transitioned into medieval kingdoms, systematic wolf extermination became policy. The process began during the Viking Age, but accelerated afterward, with the last wolves in England eliminated during the 15th century, and Scotland's final wolves hanging on until the 17th century. Ireland's last wolf was reportedly killed in 1786, ending a predator lineage that had witnessed everything from the first Celtic settlers to the Viking invasions and beyond. The Vikings also encountered another animal that seemed like a relic from a more primeval age, the armored leviathans that lurked beneath the rivers and coastal waters of northern Europe, the Atlantic and Baltic sturgeons. These living fossils, largely unchanged for over 200 million years, once dominated the waterways of Viking territories, but have since vanished from much of their historical range. The Baltic sturgeon reached truly massive proportions, with females growing up to 3 meters or 10 feet in length and weighing over 300 kilograms or 660 pounds. Their prehistoric appearance, with bony plates called scutes arranged in 5 rows along their bodies instead of scales, made them unmistakable among European fish species. Most distinctive was their elongated, armor-plated snout with a vacuum-like mouth underneath, perfectly designed for sucking up mollusks and crustaceans from river and sea floors. Their immense size made a single catch noteworthy enough to feature in regional sagas, with several Norse tales mentioning heroes who wrestled armored river dragons. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements reveals specialized sturgeon spears with detachable heads designed to penetrate the fish's armored exterior, a testament to how important these catches were to Viking fishermen. Beyond their meat, sturgeons offered multiple valuable resources. Their swim bladders were processed into isinglass, used for clarifying beer and wine, as well as making a powerful adhesive. Their cartilaginous skeletons, when boiled, produced a gelatin used in Viking medicine for joint ailments. Most prized was sturgeon roe, caviar, which became a delicacy reserved for jarls and kings. By the late Viking Age, sturgeon populations were already in decline in heavily settled areas. Their slow reproduction, with females maturing at 15 to 20 years, made them vulnerable to overfishing. Predictable spawning runs and their habit of basking near the surface made them easy targets. In the medieval period, dams blocked spawning routes, and pollution worsened their plight. By the 18th century, Baltic sturgeon had grown so rare that Scandinavian monarchs claimed them as royal property, a protection that came too late to save them. As Vikings turned their sights inland, the armored giants of the rivers gave way to shaggy titans of the forest, massive beasts that carved their own trails through the dense woodlands. I'm speaking of the European bison and its forest-dwelling cousin, the wisent. Unlike the American bison, familiar to us today, these European relatives were specifically adapted to the dense mixed forests that once covered much of northern and eastern Europe. Standing up to 1.9 meters, or 6.2 feet, at the shoulder and weighing over 900 kilograms, or 2,000 pounds, the European bison was the heaviest land animal in Europe during the Viking Age. Bulls developed massive shoulder humps, covered with shaggy dark brown fur that contrasted with the lighter coat on their lower bodies. Their distinctive curved horns, though shorter than those of the aurochs, were equally dangerous when the animal charged. Unlike grassland bison, these woodland giants could navigate between trees with surprising agility, using their powerful bodies to create paths through the densest undergrowth. These natural trails, maintained over generations of use, became known to Vikings as bison roads, reliable routes through otherwise impenetrable forest that human travelers would follow. For Viking communities pushing into new territories, these massive herbivores represented both opportunity and challenge. A successful bison hunt could provide meat for an entire village for weeks, along with hides thick enough to stop arrows, making them prized material for shields and winter clothing. The distinctive hump contained concentrated fat reserves that produced high-quality oil for lamps and waterproofing. However, hunting these forest behemoths was extraordinarily dangerous. Unlike deer or smaller game, wounded bison would typically. The Viking sagas tell grim tales of entire hunting parties wiped out by enraged bulls. These weren't just any bulls, but the European bison, creatures of immense size and power. Even moving through dense woodland, they could reach speeds of 40 kilometers per hour, and a single charge could be deadly to multiple hunters. It's a wonder to think that these animals, once so formidable, narrowly escaped complete extinction. By the late Viking Age, their populations were already dwindling, the result of intensive hunting and the clearing of forests for agriculture. They were pushed into smaller and smaller pockets. Unlike the aurochs, though, they held on. A small population survived in the Białowieża forest between Poland and Belarus, and today, roughly 7,000 descendants live there, the last direct link to the forest giants the Vikings once hunted. It makes me reflect on how the world the Vikings knew was changing, even as they sailed and settled. The very creatures that defined their landscapes were fading, pushed toward extinction by the same human expansion and climate shifts that drove the Viking Age itself. A sobering thought.